For years, the mystery haunted everyone who loved him. How could John Denver, a man known for his gentle soul, his discipline, and his passion for life, die in such a senseless, lonely crash? October 12, 1997. A clear afternoon in Monterey Bay, California. The sea was calm, the wind soft, the kind of day John would have called perfect flying weather. And then, in a heartbeat, it was over. His plane, a sleek, handmade experimental aircraft, plunged straight into the Pacific. No radio call, no distress signal, just silence. When rescuers arrived, all they found were fragments, a twisted cockpit, a guitar pick floating on the surface, and the man who once sang about the beauty of life gone in an instant. For decades, the rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed suicide, others believed sabotage. But the truth, the real cause, was something far more tragic, far more human. Because what killed John Denver wasn't recklessness or fate. It was a single, tiny mistake hidden in the heart of the machine he trusted most. And that truth, once uncovered, would change how the world remembered him forever.
Before he was John Denver, he was just Henry John Deutschendorf Jr., a shy, restless boy born on the last day of 1943 in Roswell, New Mexico. His childhood was anything but stable. His father, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Sr., was a decorated Air Force pilot, strict, emotionally distant, a man molded by war and military discipline. His mother, Irma Louise, was gentle but quiet, trapped between loyalty to her husband and tenderness for her son. Because of his father's career, the Deutschendorf family moved constantly, from Kansas to Arizona, from Oklahoma to Texas. John once said that by the time he turned 12, he had attended 9 different schools. He never learned to make friends easily. Every time he did, he had to say goodbye. He learned to live with the ache of leaving, a feeling that would later echo through his songs. At home, life was tense. His father rarely praised him. Instead, he taught lessons through silence or orders. When young John tried to sing, his father would tell him to be quiet, that singing was a distraction from real discipline. But music was the only place John felt safe. He'd sit alone in his room, strumming a cheap guitar his grandmother had given him, and sing to the walls. For him, the strings were the only thing that ever answered back. The skies, though, were different. His father would sometimes take him flying in military planes, roaring engines above endless blue. Even as a child, John felt that the air carried a kind of peace the ground could never offer. Up there, his father wasn't shouting. Up there was silence. And in that silence, love. When John was a teenager, the family finally settled in Fort Worth, Texas. He joined the choir, played the guitar at school events, and began to realize that the voice he had been told to silence was in fact his gift. But the shadow of his father's disapproval never left him. Every success he achieved, he secretly wished his father could see. After graduating, he left Texas, left the tension, the discipline, the constant moving, and drove west. He changed his name, too. Deutschendorf was too heavy, too formal, too far from the open skies he dreamed of. So he became John Denver, named after the city that represented the freedom he longed for. Music became his way of building the home he never had. And flying, that was how he kept chasing the love he could never quite touch. Those two passions, music and flight, would define everything he ever became. And tragically, everything that would one day destroy him.
In the mid-1960s, folk music was sweeping across America, the voice of a restless generation searching for meaning in a noisy world. And in that sea of protest songs and poetic ballads, a soft-spoken young man with golden hair and a quiet smile began to stand out. His name, John Denver. At first, nobody noticed him. He played in small coffee houses, sleeping in his car between shows, earning barely enough to eat. But every time he sang, people stopped talking. There was something disarmingly honest in his voice, a warmth that felt like sunlight breaking through the clouds. John's big break came when he replaced Chad Mitchell in the Chad Mitchell Trio in 1965. It wasn't fame yet, but it gave him a stage and a microphone. During one quiet evening on tour, he wrote a song called "Leaving on a Jet Plane." It was simple, heartfelt, and universal. When Peter, Paul, and Mary recorded it in 1969, it became a #1 hit. Overnight, the name John Denver went from an unknown dreamer to a songwriter every producer wanted to meet. By 1971, he released "Take Me Home, Country Roads." The song exploded. It wasn't just a hit, it was a hymn for America's soul. Listeners from the city to the countryside found themselves humming along, feeling, somehow, that John was singing to each of them personally. Success followed success. Rocky Mountain High, his love letter to Colorado. Sunshine on My Shoulders, his whisper of hope. And of course, Annie's song, the confession of a man rediscovering love after nearly losing it. John Denver became more than a singer. He was a symbol of purity, optimism, and harmony in a chaotic world. He hosted TV specials, performed for presidents, and filled stadiums with tens of thousands of fans who felt like he was their friend. But fame has its shadows. The more the world demanded of him, the further he drifted from the quiet man who once strummed alone in his bedroom. He began to chase perfection in his music, his image, his relationships. And behind that wide, easy smile, there was an exhaustion no one could see. At home, his marriage with Annie was already trembling. The same voice that brought calm to millions could no longer bridge the silence between them. John's obsession with flying, with escaping, grew stronger. Every time he stepped into the cockpit, he felt closer to peace than he ever did on the ground. He told a friend, "When I'm up there, I'm not John Denver, the singer. I'm just me." The boy who had once used music to escape his father's shadow was now using the sky to escape the weight of his own fame. And though no one knew it yet, that same sky would one day become his undoing. By the early 1980s, John Denver was everywhere. Radio, television, film, and the hearts of millions. To the world, he was the image of happiness. That eternal smile, the boyish charm, the songs that made people believe in love again. But behind that smile, John was slowly falling apart. He once told a close friend, "Everyone thinks I have it all, but sometimes I look around and realize I'm the loneliest man in the room." Fame, once his dream, had become his prison. Every album had to be bigger, every show more perfect. He was no longer just John, he was a product, a symbol, a brand. And deep down, he feared that if he stopped singing, the world would stop caring. At home, his marriage to Annie Martell, the woman who inspired Annie's song, began to crumble. The same fame that had lifted him up had quietly destroyed their peace. John's long tours kept him away from home. Annie's patience, once infinite, began to fade. The press adored their image as America's golden couple, but inside their Aspen home, they barely spoke. John tried to fill the growing void with other passions. One of them was flying. He bought planes, earned advanced licenses, and spent hours soaring above the Rockies. Up there, he said, the air felt honest. It didn't ask him to be perfect. He called it my sanctuary above the noise. But the more he flew, the less grounded he became, both emotionally and literally. Friends worried about him. They said he was drinking more, struggling with anger, sometimes snapping at small things. He even admitted to smashing a chair in frustration during an argument with Annie. When their divorce was finalized in 1982, John seemed lost. He kept smiling for cameras, kept performing for crowds, but those who looked closely saw the fatigue in his eyes. The man who once sang about sunshine now carried a storm inside him. And yet, he never stopped flying. In fact, after the divorce, he flew even more. Flying became both his therapy and his addiction, a way to silence the chaos on the ground. He collected aircrafts, experimented with designs, and built his own hangar in Aspen. He even started supporting aviation charities and dreamed of combining his music with flight awareness. But his obsession with freedom came at a cost. He began to take risks, flying experimental planes alone, sometimes with low fuel. He trusted himself completely, maybe too much. He believed he could control the sky the way he once controlled a song, with precision, harmony, and heart. But the sky doesn't care how famous you are. It doesn't forgive mistakes. And John Denver, for all his brilliance and kindness, was still human. By 1997, his career had slowed, but his love for flying never did. He was writing new songs, making peace with the past, and talking about returning to touring. He seemed lighter, as if the storm inside him had finally calmed. That's why what happened next was so hard to understand. How could a man so alive, so careful, so passionate, suddenly vanish into the sea on a clear, perfect afternoon? No one could answer it. Not yet. But soon, investigators would uncover the small, devastating truth hiding inside his beloved aircraft. It was October 12, 1997, a calm Sunday afternoon on the coast of Monterey Bay, California. The sky was clear. The ocean shimmered like glass. For John Denver, it was the kind of day that begged to be touched from above. He arrived at the Monterey Peninsula Airport around noon. Witnesses said he looked cheerful, wearing jeans, sunglasses, and that familiar half-smile that made everyone around him relax. He told the ground crew he'd just take a short flight to clear his head. The plane waiting for him wasn't a commercial jet or a well-known model. It was a small, Rutan-Long EZ, a sleek, experimental aircraft, hand-built, lightweight, and unique in design. John had purchased it only recently. He'd flown dozens of planes in his life, but this one was different. It was fast, agile, and complicated. The fuel selector valve, a simple switch used to change between fuel tanks, had been installed behind the pilot's left shoulder, an awkward, almost unreachable position. It was a tiny modification made by the plane's previous owner, but it would soon become the single most fatal flaw in John Denver's life. At 5:12 p.m., John climbed into the cockpit. He didn't file a flight plan. It was supposed to be a casual, local flight along the coast. He took off smoothly, circling the bay. Witnesses below saw the plane gliding beautifully, wings gleaming under the sunlight. Then, something changed. A sputter, a cough from the engine, then silence. At 500 feet above the water, the Long Easy began to lose power. John, calm as always, likely realized the engine had stopped drawing fuel. He needed to switch tanks. But the valve, that damned valve, was behind him. To reach it, he had to twist his body, turn away from the controls, and stretch his arm back. In that desperate motion, the plane banked sharply. For just a few seconds, John lost control. The nose dipped forward, and before he could recover, before his pilot instincts could save him, the Long Easy plunged toward the water at terrifying speed. There was no radio call, no distress signal, just impact. The plane hit the ocean with such force that it shattered instantly. Debris scattered across the waves, and silence returned to the Monterey coast, a silence that felt almost sacred. The world woke up the next day in disbelief. John Denver dead in plane crash. The headline ran across every newspaper. Fans gathered across Colorado, lighting candles, singing "Take Me Home Country Roads" through tears. In Aspen, where his home overlooked the mountains he loved, people left flowers and letters at his gate. The initial speculation was cruel and wild. Some said he had been drinking. Others whispered suicide. But when the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, released its official report in 1998, the truth broke hearts. It wasn't recklessness. It wasn't arrogance. It was a tiny, fatal design flaw. The report read, "The accident was caused by the pilot's loss of control while attempting to manipulate the fuel selector valve, which was placed in a difficult-to-reach position." That was it. The man who sang about the heavens was brought down by a switch, just a few inches out of reach. The same skies he adored took him away in the gentlest, cruelest way possible. When Annie heard the news, she said nothing for a long time. In one rare interview years later, she whispered, "He always said the sky made him feel free. I guess that's where he'll always be now." And in that single sentence, the tragedy of John Denver became eternal. More than 2 decades have passed since that quiet afternoon in Monterey Bay. Yet every time "Take Me Home Country Roads" plays on the radio, it feels like John Denver never left. His death was sudden, but his life, his music, remains one of the most beautiful contradictions in American history. A man who sang about peace, yet struggled to find it, who longed for home, yet spent his life searching for it in the sky. For years, Annie Denver stayed silent. She said she didn't want to speak about the tragedy because she wanted the world to remember his heart, not his death. When she finally broke her silence at 78, she said softly, "He wasn't reckless. He was just free." And maybe that's the truth we missed all along. John Denver didn't die because he was careless. He died because he refused to stop reaching for beauty, for freedom, for something larger than life itself. Today, his songs still echo through mountain valleys and across generations. They remind us that life, like flight, is fragile, but worth every moment we dare to lift off. Because in every sunrise over the Rockies and every voice singing along to Annie's song, John Denver's still there, flying,